name is Christine, aka Crafty Potential, and I'm on the design team for Arden Creative Studios. And in today's video, I thought I'd show you a technique that I have already shared, but in a sped up video form, showing you how you can take your decoupage papers and cover them in clear sticky ink and clear embossing powder to give them that transparent kind of look, so it looks more like an acetate. And this time I thought I'd show you how you can turn it into a shaker card as well. So the previous video was using the Hidden Creek decoupage papers, and this video is focusing on the gorgeous Season of Joy decoupage papers. This is the original card that I made, turning it into a shaker card, but I'm going to recreate this with you today using one of the other beautiful decoupage papers. So for this project, from the beautiful Ephemera Pack of the Season of Joy Page Makers version, we're going to be using one of these larger frames. There have been others in like the Page Starters collection as well, so you feel free to switch out colours if you'd rather as well. But we're going to be using one of these large 6x4 frames. However, my favourite size of card is smaller or shorter than this frame, so I'm also going to show you how we can make that frame just a little bit shorter so that it'll fit really nicely on my favourite size of greetings card as well. Then we're also going to be using a piece of one of the decoupage papers. This is half a sheet of one of the decoupage papers, and that works perfectly for creating our background behind our frame. On the original one that I did, I wasn't being as frugal as I could have been with my papers. I wanted this to kind of be a focal point in the corner, so I cut my paper more like this so I couldn't get two out of it. But if you're cutting your decoupage paper perfectly in half into more of an A6 sheet, you can definitely get two cards out of it and create two like acetate sort of like shaker cards on this as well. Because you can see the decoupage paper is kind of like a tissue paper, and it has a slight translucency to it. You can kind of see my hands behind it a little bit, but with this process of covering it in clear sticky ink and clear embossing powder, we're going to give it more of a transparent kind of look and give it that acetate kind of feel. And actually the confetti that I've used in this shaker that we'll be using in the recreation as well has given it like an opalescent finish as well because of the finish on the confetti. So you might think that I've used some kind of iridescent or opalescent embossing powder, but it is actually just clear embossing powder. It's the confetti inside that is giving us that beautiful effect. And then also for this project, we're going to be using one of the fantastic stacked sentiments from Katie's newest Season of Joy collection as well. On the original one I did Happy Holidays, but we'll see what we feel when we get to the finished card, which one we might want to use for this. So I have got a gorgeous self-healing cutting mat in the background of my video, but you don't want to do heating on a self-healing cutting mat because they're not designed to take heat. You're going to need a glass mat to work on. So I'm just going to bring in my travel-sized glass mat and place it on top of here. And then we're also going to be using baking paper. Any cheap baking paper, parchment paper, anything that has that non-stick, but not wax paper. Because wax paper in itself, if you heat it, the wax comes off of it. So it might interfere with our embossing powder. But any sort of baking paper that's just going to make it a non-stick surface, so it's going to be easier for us to clean everything off when we're done. So we kind of want to also go back and forth between working on the baking paper and having some scrap paper as well for dumping on our embossing powder. And I will at different intervals throughout this video be putting music on rather than you hearing all of the noise of me using my heat tool to melt all of the powder, because it is a slightly lengthier sort of process. And to help spread the powder out, sometimes you might find that more of it has sort of melted and amalgamated in one place. You can actually use silicone spatulas to kind of help spread it out as you're working with it as well. You would have seen all of this in the sped up video that I did a few months back, but I thought it might be nice to do a talking version of it so that you can actually have verbal instructions of how you actually create this kind of effect with your decoupage papers. So first of all, we're going to work on our baking paper with our any sticky ink pad, whether it's a perfect medium, your clear mark or your Versamark, whatever you have. You're just going to cover the front of your piece of decoupage paper in your sticky ink. And once it is covered, we're going to pick this up and put it on our scrap paper, and then we're going to cover it in clear embossing powder, any clear that you have. I'm going in with detailed first, and we might bring in some ultra thick embossing powder as well, depending how this sort of goes. But we cover it in clear. Tip off the excess, and you can also scoop up any areas that you may have missed with your powder as well. So we've now got a nice layer of clear embossing powder crystals clinging to our decoupage paper. So I'm just going to move the pot out of the way, put that back down on my greaseproof paper, and put this back in my pot so we don't have any accidents of having our heat tool on. And then now all I'm going to do is I'll zoom you in so you can see it a little bit closer. All I'm going to do is use one of these lower sort of speed heating tools, and I'm going to just melt all of this powder. Didn't actually take too long to heat that. It melted nice and quickly, but you can still see there is a bit of translucency to this. It's not quite transparent yet. So to actually make it more acetate-like, you want to flip it over and do the same process to the other side. Now this does get a little bit more tricky because, as you could see there, just like vellum, decoupage paper, when it gets anything wet on one side, wants to curl up. And obviously having the embossing powder on there as well is also making it want to curl up. So it's trickier to do the second side, as you can see. It just wants to curl. So you've got to be a little bit patient with it, and, you know, bear with it. It's a really cool effect once you've done it. So do bear with the process to actually create this kind of effect. So we'll just add our sticky ink all over the back of this. Hopefully that should help it stay a little bit flatter because we're now putting moisture on the other side of it as well. It doesn't matter if you miss any areas because we can always come back and redo those bits as well. But let's add our clear embossing powder on this side now. So just being wary of how it is curling as well. You can kind of pick up a little bit of the excess and add it on. You are going to sort of get a bit powdery as you're working with this, but everything is easy to clean up. So now we've got that ready, we can move this out of the way, and if we get a couple of objects we can sort of hold this down. Maybe if we use the lid whilst we're not putting that on, and our spatula, maybe the other end of that, just to hold it whilst we're waiting to heat it. And then we're going to tip this back in here. Now, you might be thinking, surely if you're going to heat this side, the other side is going to remelt because the heat is going to go all the way through it. And yes, that will happen. So it's actually going to end up getting stuck to our baking paper, but this is why we're working with the baking paper. So when embossing powder is melted, on the top side, like this side, once we've melted it, it just goes beautiful and shiny. When we actually melt it against this baking paper and it gets stuck to it and cools down, it's going to be more of a matte finish, and it's obviously the other side that we did first that we want to be the front, which is why we did it first, so that you're not keep on going backwards and forwards trying to play around with it. You're doing the front first, then the back, and then we come back and finish off by melting the front again to give it that beautiful shiny effect. So it is a little bit of a process, but it does work really, really nicely. So now we're just going to melt the back of this. hoping you could see when the powder was changing how you can really see the brown through it now. It's really gone more acetate-like rather than more of a vellum-like sort of appearance. But because we were, you know, sort of playing around with this, having to hold it down and stuff, we have got areas that don't have any powder on them at the moment. So now it's not curling because the other side has remelted and it's kind of clinging to our baking paper for us. So it's going to make it easier for us to reapply some powder on this side while everything is sort of staying around. But we can actually do this in a different way. If we just take some ultra thick clear embossing powder and sprinkle it anywhere where we feel like there's not a good enough coverage of clear embossing powder. And then because this is ultra thick, it's not gonna blow around as easily as detailed embossing powder, so we can still use our sort of slower action heat tool to melt this. We're just going to go from far away to begin with and then get closer as we're melting it, and then we can also play around with bringing in a second of our silicone spatulas, and we can hold it and drag any excess molten powder to make areas more uniform with how much powder is on them. And it's kind of important to get a nice coverage on the back as well, because otherwise when we flip it over and we use it as an acetate, there's going to be some areas that aren't as clear as others because the back of the decoupage paper hasn't had enough clear powder sort of melted onto it to give it that clear appearance. So that's why we're kind of doing this. Side of this is really nice and shiny. We want to make sure it's cool, and then we can peel it off of our greaseproof paper. Now if I hold this up, so this is the side we were just working on, and you can see it's really nice and shiny, but if I flip it over, you'll see that more matte effect where it was touching the baking paper. It's not actually all over it, but it's just in some of the areas where it was touching the baking paper. Now to get rid of that, because obviously this was the front and that's the correct way around our writing is on there, you want to remelt this, but obviously you don't want to remelt it against this because then you're just going to have the same problem and you're going to keep going backwards and forwards trying to melt the back again to make it nice and shiny. So what you want to do is be careful, but hold it on one side, turn your heat tool on and just gently heat over this one side to make it shiny again. So now we've got it nice and shiny again on this side. You could see I accidentally let go of a little bit too much and it actually touched the baking paper, so some of the back clear powder has come off onto there, but it's still alright on that corner because we put extra powder on that side. So once this side has then cooled down enough for us to be able to hold, we can repeat this process on the other side to get this to be nice and shiny again as well. So we're just going to wait for this to cool down, and there we have our beautiful, more acetate-like decoupage paper. Obviously it's still not like 100% acetate-like, although if I do put my fingers right near the back of it, you can see them far clearer than you could do before. But it's made it so much more acetate-like than obviously the original decoupage paper, and that is nice and cool now. Yeah, you really can see my fingers through it now. It really does turn it into more of an acetate, and it's nice and strong now as well. I'm not going to attempt to tear it because I don't want it to be torn on the card, but it's nice and strong and sturdy now. So I'm going to clear up, move all of this out of the way, and then we'll get on to finishing off this beautiful shaker card. And you can also see that having that glass mat on there to absorb all of the heat, my self-healing cutting mat is totally fine underneath. It hasn't bubbled up with the heat or anything, which it will do if you use your heat tool directly onto this. So now you can see our beautiful decoupage paper on here. And originally in my Hidden Creek one, because the papers were so beautiful and gorgeous just as they were, I literally just cut the sheet in half and stapled it onto my cards and used it like that. But for this one, we are going to turn it into a shaker card. So as I said before, I want to show you how easy it is to make this rectangle fit my card, because it is slightly too long. If you like working on an A6 card, it will fit on perfectly, but my favourite size is a little bit shorter than an A6 card, just to be awkward. But you can alter any of these rectangular frames to work for whatever project you're working on. So the way I have been doing this, because I've done it for a few different cards, I've been lining this up how I want it on my card. So I would like there to be that sort of a white border all of the way around the edge. And then when we get down to here, I'm looking and eyeballing where I want that border to be, and I'm going to cut it at that point. So where I want that border to sort of be, I'm going to cut it just there. Then we now know that I want the bottom edge of this to match up with where I have cut that there. So we can now bring our glue in, add a little dab of glue onto both of these bottom end pieces, and then we can bring this bottom of our frame into position and lining it up so that these lines are obviously in line with each other to continue the frame, but also so that the pieces that we cut are now in line with the piece that we cut off, if that makes sense. So you can now see this looks square on the corner rather than rounded, because we've actually put the rounded piece on the front right up to where we cut the frame. And now once that is in position, you can just take your scissors and undercut that little sharp corner off, and then you're going to have the perfect slightly smaller sized frame for your project. And you can do that with any of the squares or the rectangles in this lovely Page Makers set of ephemera, or with any of your page starters ones as well. So I think that's going to fit really nicely on this card, and because of the way the design goes on this paper, we could make it a landscape card rather than a portrait card. So we'll see how we feel when we get to the end of making this card, but I don't think it really matters if you use something up the wrong way. So what we're going to do now is we're going to stick our frame onto our handmade acetate basically, and we want to make sure this is a nice strong firm bond all of the way around. So I am going to use red liner tape to stick this on to make sure it's going to stick on there really well. I'm going to go with 6mm, so I've got to be careful that it's lining up nicely, because this frame is exactly 6mm wide. And then I can just peel the backing off of these pieces and we can add it on top of our embossed decoupage paper. Trying to sort of get those straight lines that are in the design lining up, I think, with the actual frame. I think that looks quite nice when they're actually parallel to the frame. Then once we've gotten that into position, we can carefully cut around the frame to get rid of the excess of our decoupage paper. And some of these little wider pieces you could even save to use on other projects as well, maybe sort of adding them and stapling them onto the top of a tag or something like that to make use of those. Then once we've done that, we want to flip this over and add our foam tape all of the way around the perimeter on the frame portion, and I'm going to use a 2mm height of foam tape, so we've got a nice sort of amount of space in there for our confetti to shake around in. And I'm going to cut my foam tape down to roughly 5mm in width, because this is 6mm and my tape is actually 19mm, so I can get 4 strips of this out to go around all of the edges of my shaker frame. And I'm just going to do the 2 longest sides first, and then I will fill in the shorter sides, and we'll make sure that we get nice joins butting up against each other so nothing can escape out of our shaker card. We're not going to use anything too fine in this, but if you were going to use micro beads or something really small that could escape, maybe like glitter, you do definitely want to make sure all of your joins are butting right up against each other so nothing can come out of your shaker. And a top tip as well, if you are using really small things, put a blob of glue in each of the corners first, and then if anything does go there to try and escape, the glue is just going to catch it and it will just stick it there, and then it will block the hole so nothing will be able to escape in the future. So now we've got our foam tape on there, we need to decide, are we going to do a portrait card or are we going to do a landscape card? So my original is a portrait card. I do quite like the idea of doing this one landscape actually. Yeah, I think I'm going to go with landscape on this one. And on this one, I didn't actually hide the joins here. I completely forgot about hiding the joins. So on this card, we're going to have the joins over here. And we'll see how we feel once we finished it, if we want to hide those joins or not. But the next step is going to be to add our confetti. Now, normally, when you're doing a shaker card, if you're not putting it directly onto your card blank, you would fill this part of the shaker with your confetti, and then you'd put a backing piece on, and then you'd trim around it, and then you'd put it on your final card. But because this frame now fits so nicely onto our final card blank, and I want it to be white behind there so the pattern shows through, I'm just going to actually put it directly onto my card blank. So in this case, we're just going to put our confetti on here, just a pile of it onto here, and I'm using a couple of different sizes of like white iridescent circular confetti. So I'm going to go with more small ones and a few larger ones as well. And these large ones, I'm just going to make sure they're all separated from each other because they do like to stick together, these ones. So you can also use die cuts inside your shakers as well. It doesn't have to be confetti. So now we want to have removed the backing tape from our 3D foam, and we just want to place this over the top of our pile of confetti centrally on our card blank. Then, before you're tempted to shake it, press really firmly all of the way around the perimeter to make sure that your foam tape is well and truly stuck onto your card blank. And then you can have fun shaking your gorgeous shaker card, and it has done that iridescent effect again. So that is literally using an iridescent or opalescent kind of confetti underneath clear embossing. It must be some kind of refraction of light or something on that embossing powder, but it gives a really subtle shaker. You can hear the shaker, but it's actually more subtle because it's white confetti on a white background, but I really love the effect of this. So the next step is deciding what sentiment we want to use, and there are 5 new Christmassy themed sentiments. I think Peace and Joy would go really nicely on this one. I'm going to go with Peace and Joy, I think. So we're going to take this out of our packaging, and we can sort of place it on to roughly decide where we want to put it. And on the original card, I have actually taken from the 12 by 12 solid paper pad, I took 1 sheet of each of them out of there and cut it into quarter sheets so that I had them ready to work with whenever I'm creating my cards. And I have found this so useful for just die cutting bits and pieces and having a specific colour there for me ready. So what we need to do is we need to pick a colour that we want our sentiment to be in. I'm quite tempted to go for this really dark blue. I think that would work really nicely. And on the original card, I've done 1 sentiment from the colour and then 1 sentiment from white, and then shadowed the white one behind it so that we've got a nice drop shadow and it helps it stand out nicely. So that's what I'm going to do again this time. And I think this more textured part down here is going to work well. So I'm going to cut that out, and then I'm also going to cut one out of white as well. Okay, so there we've got our 2 sentiments, and we can decide, are we going to do like I did for the original and put the darker colour on top of the white? Or are we going to do the white on top of the darker colour, because this background is a bit busier. I think maybe the white on top of the darker colour is going to work better for this card because of the busyness of the background. So I'm going to go peace and joy like that, and I'm just going to stick these on top of each other with a slight drop shadow. And there we have our card, but if we do want to actually hide this join a little bit more, we could add a piece of ribbon around this side. You could take some gorgeous like sheer organza ribbon and actually have a piece of it running down this side of the card just to hide those joins. And we could even maybe run it across the bottom as well. If we did like a almost like a present kind of look to it and had it going in both directions, I think that would look really nice. Let's do that on this card just to make it look a little bit different. So there we are, we've got our finished beautiful shaker card using the gorgeous decoupage papers from the Season of Joy collection and some clear embossing powder to create our own kind of custom acetate for a shaker card. So really hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you again in the next one. Bye!